Good afternoon. How are you? Well, I've had a good day to get some work done, and those of you who were interested in the book on pain, that's gone out, and I've left some information in various places if others are interested. Let's see, the weather today, thanks to Thomas Jefferson, 65 degrees, you gotta love them. Humidity is 21, and there's 1 mile an hour wind, they say. I think that Trump, but not exclusively, think we're all dumb. That we can't read between the lines when we read a newspaper article that may contain facts that are measurable and true. And we can separate those facts that we read from some of the conclusions in the gloss, either of the title of the story or the lead of the story. So, for example, if you read today that there was a decision with regard to Ukraine moving toward a ceasefire, you would find that encouraging. Now, the details that I've read in the news, and I don't have anybody at the State Department feeding me information, the stories actually lay out the following: that there's a period for which a narrow number of targets are protected. So Putin has agreed he will not attack energy and infrastructure targets, but he won't agree to a ceasefire otherwise. So now all those who want to keep us happy and persuade us that something good is happening, saying this is a step forward toward a ceasefire. Now, we have seen a similar approach, brace yourself, you Netanyahu fans, by Netanyahu. Over in his neck of the woods, he promises, oh yeah, ceasefire, and this is going to happen, that's going to happen. But he drags his feet, keeps fighting and shooting and killing. So, not to be unfair to either of these gentlemen, but Putin, I think, is doing the same thing. I just continue to rummage through Ukraine and seize as much as I can, so that if we can bring you to your knees at the end of these bogus ceasefires, then we'll get much more territory. And so this is the kind of thing that they presume are stupidity, but they also presume that people who see and know what they're observing will remain silent because they are coerced into passivity lest they be at risk themselves. And that's a beast. That's a real beast for us. Peace pretends, forfends, a plague on both your houses. You think that car could go any faster on a dirt road? It's just so ignorant. So, now the trouble with that, a plague on both your houses, is that we live in one of those houses, the United States. Even as we betray our allies, including Ukraine. And what are the conditions that are floating around that would be in the final ceasefire? Well, Ukraine couldn't join NATO. They'd have to agree to cut its army back. They have to protect the Russian language. Historically, some Irish may remember the past discussions about what language means. And so, what Putin probably wants is Russia to replace Ukrainian in all respects, as did the English want the Irish to lose the old Irish. So, this is all, and also the games go with that. We want to cut off your games. Now, those things are not on the table and they're not said. They'll follow if there is a one-sided agreement of peace, because then they'll have control and they can do whatever they want. And while we're holding back support and compromising our allies, giving support with certain planes and updates and those kinds of things that allow Zelensky and Ukraine to fight back, we are, through Trump, compromising Ukraine. And you can read all the stories. The facts in the stories tell you that this is no good deal for Ukraine. So what is Ukraine doing? Well, I guess it's bargaining for time, but it's not getting them. I mean, it gets some sanity if certain targets are free, but then there are all the other things. People are still being killed. So there's that. I think that we might say, having read about how some people in love scenes, they now have intimacy coordinators. I don't even want to imagine how that doesn't work. But perhaps Trump and Putin need an intimacy coordinator, as Trump is busy betraying our nation and our allies because of his intimacy with Putin. It goes back to 1987, and it's when Russia was grooming wealthy American businessmen as possible assets. So is Trump an asset? Oh, tell us, Donnie, it isn't so. Now, how are things going in the courts? Well, one judge who's dealing with the U.S. aid package in the state and in the State Department has issued an order to restore emails and computer access to all employees of USAID, including those on administrative leave, because what they're saying is, oh yeah, we put them back to work, but we don't give them any ability to work. So the Maryland judge who dealt with this blocked the cuts to the agency, but it's still not working because we have this dual. So it's like they want to have deniability for ignoring a court order, even as they're ignoring a court order, dragging their feet, giving calendars of how they're going to accomplish one thing or another, when they don't really appear very seriously about doing that. You know, it's an old story, and there are mixed views on the truth of it, which is Jackson supposedly said, I think it was to Marshall, when it was an order involving non-native lands, let Marshall enforce his own order. Now, historians say that didn't happen and have all sorts of explanations for it. But Trump is trying to do something like that, and just borders on coming out and saying it, rather than giving himself the kind of deniability that evil persons like Trump do. So our school system, and when you don't want Johnny to write or read, you cut the money to schools. You know, I don't know. That's our America right now. So let's turn to the judge, who's Boasberg, who's dealing with the deportation problem, which is basically the government ignored the judge's plain order orally and in writing afterwards, and they knew it. And so now they're saying, oh, you know, two things. Well, several things. One, you don't have the power to contradict the president. Yes, I do, because the act that you've invoked doesn't authorize him to do what he's doing, so he doesn't have the power. He doesn't have the authority. And that's the law. Sorry. And they say, well, no, he has inherent power because he's the president to do this. Well, you know, I'm glad that you feel that way, and that might be a good argument in a saloon, but it doesn't work in a courtroom. So the reaction is Trump goes around and says, we should impeach this judge, Boasberg. We can't have this going on. And so Trump is saying that Boasberg is a person who is a troublemaker and an agitator. And because of that, he should be impeached. Now, that's not the end of it. Trump's people have written to the Court of Appeals asking them to remove Boasberg as the judge in the case. And I guess they know this, but the Chief Justice of the United States, Roberts, appointed Boasberg to that court that deals with confidential matters, so that Roberts has a good opinion of this man and of his work and so forth. But this is a constitutional tinderbox, because the government refused to answer questions, and now Judge Boasberg has said, you have until noon tomorrow, and confidential or not, I can look at those things. There are provisions, ways to do that. So they're going to, or not, provide a sealed submission in response to his questions. Sort of, where were the planes and when? And forget this bullshit argument about they're over international waters, because the people in this case are no less than Trump, the Attorney General of the United States, the Secretary of State, and I have dominion over them. And you can't just run away and hide. And the court said in open court today that the attitude of the government is, we don't care, we'll do what we want. Well, that's really not going to work, not for a judge. And there's one other good piece of news, and that is that Roberts has said, we do not seek the impeachment of a sitting judge. That's not how we do business. And so, stuff it, Trump. Now, that is the White House has been talking as if Roberts and company are in their pockets. But I think that there's a 5-4 split here that neither Trump nor Alito will help overcome. Because Alito, he really is a barn burner, that guy. And his arguments the last time when he disagreed about a per curiam opinion by the court, I said, how did he ever think the opinion he was writing, attacking a judge on the court for having the nerve to actually enter a decision based on the facts and the law before him? And so it becomes very hard to agree with him on any legal or factual ground when he is so extreme. And I think that dynamic will work out here. If I were judging the situation and I was trying to help Trump, and I don't want to give tutorials to the Trump team, but this is pretty obvious, you would be smarter not to try to go to the Supreme Court, and certainly not to say I got the Supreme Court in my back pocket. And I wonder what Gorsuch would do with the plain meaning of this, because he's a plain meaning guy. You know, he wants to read the minds of our founding fathers, and 1798 is pretty damn close, which is the first of the alien acts that weren't enforced. And this is a successor that they're invoking in the current atmosphere. And this is an act that only empowers the president in a time of war, and that there's an invasion or some special attack, and by a state. What state is that? Who's trying to take us over? Who's trying to evade us? You know. So it's again, going back to my earlier remark, it's a bullshit theory to mislead us. And the papers and commentators, they don't make that clear, and that misleads us. Do they do it on purpose? They don't know. They don't do the research. This is not a time to hide our best spokespersons, but we'll see. Oh, and by the way, anybody within the sound of my voice, on March 28th, we're having a resist meeting in Northern Virginia at a skating rink, which is We're not going to be standing on thin ice because the ice will not be evident. And it's a decent sized place, so all hands on deck. And the idea is to vent to what people think, a hearing, to share perspectives, and to see how we go forward. Now, among the ways we go forward is we do speak truth to power, but we do it in court, we do it in protest, we push the people on the hill. If we can contribute in any way, we do that. If we can run for office, we do that. Because that's the war we're in. It's a war of ideologies. And I'm sure that everybody that's listening to me is on the side of Jeffersonian democracy or some variation of that, believes in a republic. Whereas on the other side are the autocrats, the dictators, the monarchists, who are in the original image of what Hamilton and Adams and a whole bunch of them wanted. And what Jefferson did when Adams couldn't succeed to have a second term was, in his 8 years in office, he basically eliminated the Federalists as it was known then. But like a Frankenstein monster, it's back and it's shed its clothing, and it's like one of these horrible monsters. I forget, there's one that turns into this, well, they all turn into some wormy substance or something and strike out. And so the Federalists come back, and their current caretaker for their insane suppression of anybody who's not male or white is this force in America. And too many people are intimidated by the bullying tactics of this force to resist it the right way, except for the judges. And so that's now why we're going to see Trump and company turning their attention on attacking the courts. So we have to do everything we can to shore them up. So it's March 28th. I don't remember the time. I'll circulate it. I'm one of the panelists, but we expect to be there'll be a bunch of panelists talking about where do we go from here. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I wish you a happy evening. And tomorrow, hopefully, I'll be out here in the Cathedral of Trees again. Bye-bye.